America is the only place where someone can owe money for a medical bill they never received, a parking ticket issued to a car they don't own, and a gym membership they tried to cancel during a hurricane. And somehow, that's just the warm-up. 1. A debt collector once tried to convince a man he owed money for a hospital visit that never happened, which is already impressively American. But the real comedy started when the collector claimed the debt was valid because your name sounds like someone who would have gone to the ER. The guy asked for proof. They sent him a bill with the wrong birth date, wrong address, and a medical procedure only performed on women, which he very much was not. When he pointed this out, the collector said with breathtaking confidence, "Well, someone has to pay it." That was their entire legal argument. The cosmic belief that random billing is just the circle of life. The man spent months fighting a debt for a surgery he couldn't physically receive, performed in a state he'd never visited, by a doctor who didn't exist. And the best part? The collector kept insisting he was ignoring his responsibilities, as if the real irresponsibility wasn't billing strangers like dartboard targets in the world's laziest insurance scam. 2. A woman discovered she owed $4,800 in credit card debt to a bank she had never opened an account with, and the bank's explanation was a masterpiece of corporate logic. According to them, she was responsible because the account was opened by someone with access to your mailbox. That's it. Not her. Just someone who had been near her mailbox at some point in history, like a mail carrier, a neighbor, a confused raccoon. Any of them could have done it. But she was now financially liable because her mailbox existed on Earth. When she challenged the charges, the bank proudly informed her they had a recording of her voice authorizing the account, which turned out to be a man with a deep baritone and a Jersey accent so distinct it could cut concrete. The bank's final stance? You can't prove that's not you. Truly, nothing captures American finance like being asked to prove you aren't a middle-aged man from Newark with a sinus problem. 3. A guy learned he owed $12,000 in back taxes because the IRS believed he owned a second house, an unexpected development, considering he barely afforded the first one. The supposed second home was a collapsing shed in rural Arkansas, purchased by someone with the same first name and absolutely none of the same identifying information. But the government fused the two identities like a chaotic financial Power Rangers episode. When he called to explain the error, an agent told him, "Well, our system says it's yours, so it's yours." That was the beginning and end of the reasoning. He then received a penalty for failure to maintain the property, which was impressive because he had never heard of the property until that week. The shed was literally falling over in the listing photos. The IRS wanted him to repair it. Nothing says America like being billed for tax fraud on real estate you didn't buy, don't want, and physically cannot locate without GPS coordinates and a tetanus shot. 4. A college graduate found herself being chased for $19,000 in student loan interest she didn't owe, because the loan servicer had accidentally duplicated her entire account like it was a Word document someone copy-pasted too many times. Her real balance existed, but the phantom balance existed too, floating in the system like a cursed financial twin. Every time she called to report the error, the company reassured her they were looking into it, which apparently meant staring at the spreadsheet and whispering prayers. After months of threats, she finally reached a supervisor who admitted, in a tone usually reserved for tragedies, that the system couldn't delete the fake loan because it technically thinks it's alive. The debt had achieved full consciousness. It had become a digital cryptid haunting her credit score. She ultimately had to dispute it every month like clockwork, because even after it was removed, the system kept resurrecting it. This was not debt. It was a zombie with paperwork. 5. A man received a bill from a collection agency demanding he pay $1,300 for a traffic violation issued to his car, except the car in question had been crushed and recycled 8 years earlier. The agency insisted the vehicle was still active, a description rarely used for cars that currently exist as soup cans. When he explained the car was long gone, they requested documented proof of destruction, as if normal people keep funeral programs for sedans. He provided the scrapyard receipt, which the agency rejected because the car's color was listed as gray instead of silver. Apparently, the afterlife is strict about shade accuracy. After weeks of back and forth, they suggested he reach out to the vehicle directly, which is an incredible request when the vehicle is, once again, recycled metal scattered across the continent. The ticket wasn't even in his state, which means someone resurrected his car's identity to commit traffic crimes, and the agency simply shrugged and billed him for necrovehicular misconduct. 6. A woman opened her credit report and discovered a debt for $780 owed to a gym she had never stepped inside. When she called, the gym confidently explained that her membership auto-renewed, which was impressive since she had never signed up in the first place. The contract signature on file looked like someone had written her name with their non-dominant foot, but the manager remained unfazed, insisting all signatures look different depending on the lighting. The gym also claimed she had attended 57 sessions in 1 month, a Guinness World Record-level commitment she certainly did not make. When she pointed out she lived 900 miles away, the manager suggested she might have forgotten. Yes, forgotten the 900-mile commute for daily plank sessions. Eventually, she learned the debt was tied to a typo where someone misspelled their own name so badly it transformed into hers. And of course, the gym refused to fix it because the system won't let us cancel imaginary people. 7. A guy once spent 2 years battling a debt collector who insisted he owed $3,400 for cable TV service at an address that, somewhat inconveniently, had burned to the ground before he even moved to that city. The collector refused to believe him, suggesting the bill was simply overdue. When he pointed out the timeline issue, namely that the house had been ash for 3 years before the service started, the collector told him, "That sounds like a landlord issue." The house quite literally did not exist. Yet someone had apparently managed to subscribe to 200 channels and a premium sports package from the ruins. When he contacted the cable company, they insisted the service was real, but refused to disclose who used it, because that would violate their privacy. Imagine protecting the identity of a ghost pirate streaming ESPN from the rubble. His credit score tanked, and he eventually had to dispute the debt by submitting county fire department documentation proving the home was not only vacant, it was a charcoal-themed memory. 8. A man received a cheerful letter congratulating him on being approved for a home loan he never applied for, followed by a much less cheerful letter saying he now owed $2,600 in processing fees for backing out. According to the lender, someone with his name and no matching information had applied for a mortgage using an address that turned out to be a Cracker Barrel restaurant. When he explained he had no intention of living between the country store and the biscuit station, the lender insisted the fees were already assessed. They clarified he could dispute the charges but warned, with bureaucratic menace, that doing so might delay the closing date of the loan he didn't apply for and the property he did not own. He kept asking how they verified the applicant's identity, and they proudly stated, "We called the number on the application." The number, predictably, belonged to the applicant. Truly a flawless system. Financial institutions confirming fraud by checking with the fraudster. 9. A woman discovered a mysterious $900 lunch debt sent to collections by her former elementary school, despite having graduated 20 years earlier and having no children enrolled there. The district claimed their system showed she owed payment for cafeteria meals purchased in 2004. When she reminded them she was, in fact, a child in 2004 and legally incapable of having her own children racking up debt, they suggested she consider setting up a payment plan. She requested transaction records, but they could only produce a single sheet of paper with the words, "Lunch, $900, written in a font that looked like someone typed it during a small earthquake. One official implied perhaps she had been using the cafeteria recreationally, an accusation typically reserved for raccoons. After weeks of calls, the district admitted the debt was an error caused when their new software assigned meal charges to the wrong humans. America, where even elementary schools create multi-generational debt. 10. A guy learned he allegedly owed $1,700 to an electric company in a state he had never visited because someone opened an account under his name and then proceeded to power what must have been a small civilization. When he tried to dispute the charges, the utility company confidently replied, "Usage doesn't lie." According to their records, he consumed enough electricity to either run a bustling data center or maintain a colony of hamsters operating tiny treadmills 24 hours a day. When he explained he had no connection to the state, they requested proof, like a scanned copy of your childhood address history. The company also refused to close the fraudulent account unless he personally returned the equipment, which he didn't have because, again, wrong state. Their solution? Just drive over and drop it off. Yes, a 14-hour road trip to return a stolen meter. The final insult? They warned failure to comply could lead to further usage, as though the mystery hamster kingdom wasn't already doing enough. 11. A woman was hounded for $2,200 in medical debt after an ambulance company claimed she had been transported during an emergency she did not attend, in a city she had never been to, on a date when she was demonstrably at work. To prove her identity, the company sent her a patient signature that looked like someone had scribbled on the form while fleeing bees. When she pointed out the signature bore no resemblance to hers, the representative explained, "People sign differently when they're stressed. Apparently so differently they transform into a left-handed toddler balancing a pen on a trampoline." The ambulance company then insisted she owed the money because no one else has claimed the transport, as if emergency rides were unclaimed luggage at the airport. The best part? They offered a discount if she paid immediately, as though she should feel honored by their generosity in letting her buy a medical kidnapping she never experienced. 12. A man received a collections notice for $650 in unpaid water bills from an apartment he moved out of a decade earlier, despite the fact the building had been demolished. The utility company explained the charges were recent because the meter was still active underground. Yes, according to the system, water was actively being consumed by dirt. When he pointed out the building no longer existed, they suggested he check for leaks. He asked where exactly he should check. Perhaps the ghost of his former bathroom. They then claimed the debt was valid because the account remained open, a phrase that feels bold when applied to a location now hosting weeds and a raccoon with no fixed address. The collector even proposed a payment plan, noting, "These things happen." What things? Phantom water usage by subterranean homeowners? In any case, the man eventually had to gather demolition permits, photos of rubble, and a sworn statement confirming he does not live inside the earth like a startled mole. 13. A woman discovered a $1,150 debt on her credit report for a payday loan she didn't take, and the lender proudly provided verifiable evidence. A grainy security camera still of a person whose face was entirely obscured by a baseball cap, sunglasses, and the kind of hoodie usually worn in documentaries about wildlife smugglers. The lender insisted the mysterious figure walks similarly to you, which officially makes gait analysis the new frontier of American financial accuracy. When she asked about identifying documents, they provided a photocopy of an ID so blurry it could have been a potato with her name Sharpied on it. They also claimed the signature matched hers in spirit. She then asked why the loan was issued in a city she had never visited, and the lender suggested she may have blacked it out. Yes, a casual out-of-body road trip to obtain high-interest debt. Ultimately, she had to file a police report so everyone could formally acknowledge the obvious. She was not the hooded blur from Mystery Loan Planet. 14. A man's credit score plummeted after a furniture store claimed he owed $3,900 for a sofa he never bought. A sofa he later discovered had been delivered to an address that turned out to be a vacant field next to a highway. When he asked how a couch could be delivered to a location without a building, the company cheerfully replied, "The driver marked it as delivered. That means it was delivered." To what? A tumbleweed? A passing coyote looking to upgrade its den? The store insisted he was responsible for the item unless he could retrieve it himself. So he visited the field and, shockingly, did not locate a sectional sofa waiting politely for pickup. When he reported that the couch was unsurprisingly missing, the company suggested environmental factors might have moved it. Yes, the wind, presumably, picked up a 200-pound recliner and launched it into another dimension. The man eventually had to dispute the charge through his bank, proving once again that in America, even furniture can commit tax-deductible vanishing acts. 15. A woman was billed for $5,700 in emergency veterinary expenses for a dog she did not own, a fact she attempted to clarify several times, but which the clinic dismissed as irrelevant because your name is on the file. Her name was indeed on the file, because the actual owner spelled their own name wrong by 4 full letters and the system auto-corrected it to hers, as if the software simply got tired and decided close enough. The bill covered surgery, medication, overnight boarding, and something called emotional stabilization, which seemed ambitious given the dog wasn't hers and she had no emotional connection to it. When she asked for identification proving she had ever set foot in the clinic, they offered a description of the client. Woman, Average height. Riveting. The clinic refused to remove the charge unless she provided proof she didn't own the dog, a task made difficult when the dog was alive, and living happily with the real owner, who remained blissfully unaware that their pet had accidentally committed identity theft. 16. A man discovered he allegedly owed $2,900 to a streaming service for device overuse, which was confusing since the service costs $10 a month and does not, in any universe, penalize people for enthusiasm. According to the company, someone had logged into his account from 32 devices across 7 states, which suggests either he was running a secret black market cinema empire or someone's cousin had shared the login more aggressively than antibiotics at a summer camp. When he pointed out that he didn't own 32 devices, the representative chirped, "Well, someone does, and they used your account, so that's technically your ecosystem." They then explained that he was being charged for enterprise-level access, a phrase that should never apply to binge-watching sitcom reruns. When he asked how the charges could exist without his permission, they proudly revealed that the account password was set to password, which the company had allowed because we respect customer autonomy. Nothing says American tech quite like being billed for a digital crime spree committed by a username that's basically an invitation to burglary. 17. A woman opened her mail and found a debt notice from a toll road she had never driven, mostly because the road didn't exist when the tolls were supposedly racked up. The agency insisted she owed $412 for unpaid crossings, which raised the important question of how she crossed something that wasn't built yet. When she questioned the timeline, the representative told her the charges were preliminary, a word normally used for science experiments, not retroactive time travel tolling. They suggested she consider whether someone borrowed her car, a helpful tip except for the part where her car was 3 years away from existing during the dates in question. When she mentioned this small detail, the agency advised her to file a historical exception request, which sounded like she was applying to adjust the timeline in a Marvel movie. It took 6 weeks for them to confirm the truth. Their system defaulted to future projections. Yes, she was charged for theoretical driving. America remains the only place where infrastructure debt can go delinquent before the infrastructure does. 18. A man received a collections letter for $1,140 owed to a dentist he had never met, which is an impressive feat considering most people avoid the dentist on purpose, not accidentally. According to the invoice, he had missed 3 appointments in a single week, appointments allegedly scheduled at 8:30 a.m., 9 a.m., and 9:15 a.m., which would require either teleportation or a dental hygiene crisis of biblical proportions. When he called to protest, the office manager insisted he was responsible because our reminder texts were delivered successfully, as though a text sent into the void constitutes consent. The descriptions of the procedures missed were equally fascinating. One was for a root canal on a tooth he didn't have because it had been extracted a decade earlier. The other was for preventative crown maintenance, which sounds like something royalty gets billed for. When he requested proof he'd ever been a patient, they faxed him a form with his name spelled incorrectly 3 different ways on the same line. The office refused to drop the charges because we can't rewrite the schedule. Truly, dentistry has entered its multiverse era. 19. A woman found herself on the hook for $3,300 in unpaid parking fines from a city she hadn't visited since high school. And the reason was almost poetic. Someone had been repeatedly ticketed using her old license plate, which the DMV had reassigned to a different driver because numbers circulate. The city insisted she needed to prove she wasn't the one driving, as though most people can produce time-stamped alibis for every Tuesday afternoon in the past 5 years. When she pointed out she lived on the opposite side of the country, the clerk asked whether she had considered relocating temporarily. The true comedy unfolded when she contacted the DMV. They confirmed the plate had been legally reassigned but refused to provide details because of privacy considerations, meaning she was expected to pay for a stranger's poor parallel parking skills without ever learning who the mystery serial parker was. Meanwhile, the city kept adding late fees like sprinkles on a financial Sunday. It took months before anyone admitted the obvious. The real offender was somewhere out there using her former plate like a cursed talisman. 20. A guy opened a bill demanding he pay $760 for a subscription to an identity protection service that he, not surprisingly, never signed up for. Ironically, the service claimed he owed the balance because his identity had been used to enroll him. which is exactly the sort of paradox that should make the universe fold in half. He called customer support, where the representative solemnly explained that the debt was evidence of why he needed their product, a pitch so bold it practically deserved a sales bonus. When he asked them to cancel the fraudulent account, they refused until he could prove he was the real him and not the fake him pretending to be the real him. They emailed him a verification form requiring a driver's license, a utility bill, and a secondary method of consciousness confirmation, which is a lot to ask from someone trying to escape a subscription trap. Eventually, his only solution was to freeze his credit, file a fraud report, and let the identity protection company investigate the identity theft that originated from the identity protection company. 21. A woman received a cheerful text informing her that her recently financed vehicle had missed a payment, which was a surprise considering she did not have a recently financed vehicle, and, as far as she knew, no one had stolen a car in her name, unless they were the politest car thief alive, sending courtesy reminders. When she called the lender, they insisted the debt was hers because the borrower used her phone number. Never mind that the borrower's name, address, age, and entire life were completely different. Apparently, the magical glue binding American finance together is a stray phone digit. When she pointed out this made no sense, the representative explained, "People share phones," as if she had loaned her number to a stranger who then acquired a 2022 sedan. The lender refused to remove the loan until they reached the mystery driver, who naturally did not answer the phone because it was not, in fact, their number. The woman ultimately proved her innocence by sending documentation showing she hadn't lived in the borrower's state for 10 years, a level of evidence normally required to beat a federal indictment. 22. A man received a letter claiming he owed $1,080 for a business loan taken out by his company. An exciting discovery given that he did not own a company, direct a company, or remotely resemble someone who had ever voluntarily filed business paperwork. The lender explained that the loan was taken out by a sole proprietorship bearing his name, registered at an address belonging to a nail salon. When he questioned how this was possible, the representative said, "Sole proprietorships don't require verification," which is a beautiful way to admit the system works on the honor code of a kindergarten group project. The business, according to the paperwork, sold consulting services, a phrase so vague it could mean anything from tax advice to interpretive dance support. The lender refused to remove the debt because they needed proof he wasn't the business, which is hard to demonstrate when the business technically exists only on a $12 form someone filled out with a pen that clearly malfunctioned. He eventually filed an affidavit stating he was not and had never been a nail salon-based entrepreneur. 23. A woman was billed for $540 worth of emergency fire response fees from a county she had never lived in because firefighters had been dispatched to extinguish a kitchen fire in a home she didn't own, after someone renting the house gave her name to the fire department as the responsible party. According to the county, anyone can designate anyone as the responsible party during a fire, which seems like a policy devised by someone who hates legal clarity. She requested verification, and they proudly sent a form listing her relationship to incident as financially accountable individual, which is not a relationship found in nature. She asked for evidence she owned or managed the property. They offered a blurry photo of the burning stove as if that somehow implicated her. The county refused to drop the charges unless the actual tenant confirmed the mistake, but he had moved, vanished, or possibly ascended to a higher plane to avoid confrontation. She ultimately had to send notarized proof that she was not, in fact, the cosmic overseer of strangers' cooking disasters. 24. A man discovered a $2,050 charge on his credit report tied to a mandatory homeowners association fee. A remarkable twist, considering he did not own a home and had never interacted with an HOA except as a cautionary tale. He eventually tracked the debt to a condo building he had never visited, where a board member explained that his name was added to the ownership roster due to a clerical error during software migration. The system had assigned each unit a random placeholder owner, and he happened to win the most expensive round of data entry roulette. When he asked how this could be resolved, they suggested he attend the next board meeting, which felt ambitious given he lacked a unit, a parking space, and the will to attend HOA gatherings, even hypothetically. The association insisted he was obligated to pay until officially removed from the system, essentially making him a phantom homeowner whose only privilege was being billed. It required 3 affidavits and a real estate attorney to convince the board that he did not secretly own a property he had never seen. 25. A woman received a collections call claiming she owed $1,260 after failing to return rented medical equipment, specifically a wheelchair rented to someone with her name but not her height, weight, age, or physical existence in that zip code. The rental company insisted the debt stood because the patient verified the information verbally, which apparently means stating her name out loud was enough to bind her to the fate of a wheelchair she never touched. When she asked for delivery confirmation, they provided a signature that looked like someone had drawn a lightning bolt and then wandered off mid-stroke. Their proposed solution was that she track down the real patient and retrieve the wheelchair personally, a request usually reserved for bounty hunters. They refused to close the account because equipment must be returned to complete the contract, which is a bold stance when the contract was created using a name-match strategy usually found in guessing games. She escalated the issue until the company admitted the truth. Their system defaults to the first matching name in the database, meaning she had been ensnared by alphabetical destiny. 26. A man was billed $3,400 by an airline for unrecovered luggage, a confusing charge since passengers are normally the ones owed money when luggage goes missing, not the other way around. According to the airline, the suitcase, owned by someone with his exact first and last name, had disappeared during a flight he never took, and therefore he owed the company compensation for unreturned property. When he asked whether they had considered the possibility of 2 different people sharing a name, the representative replied, "That scenario is uncommon, despite living in a country with approximately 4 million Johns alone." The man also pointed out that he had never purchased a ticket with that airline, to which the representative confidently responded, "The system disagrees." They claimed the luggage contained items of significant value, which somehow justified the debt, even though they refused to tell him what the items were because the contents of the bag are private. Yes, he owed money for a stranger's confidential socks. It took a consumer protection attorney to break the news to the airline that name coincidence is, in fact, real. 27. A woman suddenly became delinquent on a pet adoption loan she did not take out, largely because she did not adopt a pet. According to the lender, she had financed the purchase of an emotional support parrot, an assertively loud bird she had never seen, heard, or emotionally supported. The adoption center produced paperwork bearing a signature that looked like someone signing while riding a unicycle. When she asked for identification of the borrower, they refused, citing avian privacy laws, which were not real but were delivered with such confidence she momentarily questioned her understanding of bird jurisprudence. They insisted she pay the remaining balance or return the parrot, which she could not do since the parrot was off living its best life with its actual owner, probably screaming into the void from a sunny perch. She ultimately had to gather documented proof she had never set foot in the adoption center, a process that felt like proving she wasn't secretly harboring a hidden, credit-damaging bird. 28. A guy discovered he owed $890 to a university he never attended, and the reason was simple. Someone with a similar name dropped out mid-semester, and the registrar merged their accounts for system efficiency. He received invoices for unpaid tuition, overdue library books, and a lab fee for a chemistry class whose syllabus alone would have melted him. When he called to clarify the mistake, the bursar's office insisted he must have forgotten enrolling, a statement suggesting people frequently black out entire academic careers. When he asked for proof, they provided a photo ID so pixelated it resembled a witness protection sketch. They refused to correct the record because the term is already in progress, as though bureaucratic momentum had achieved escape velocity. He eventually had to file a formal request to be unenrolled from a university he'd never applied to, a process involving 3 offices, 2 affidavits, and the emotional energy usually reserved for divorcing a place. 29. A woman received notice that she owed $2,750 for unauthorized trash collection, which is the kind of debt category that already feels aggressively American. According to the sanitation company, someone at her address had been using an industrial dumpster without paying the correct commercial rate. This would have been compelling evidence of wrongdoing, except she lived in a studio apartment roughly the size of the dumpster in question. When she tried to explain that she physically could not fit such a container anywhere near her building, the representative helpfully suggested she might not be aware of all trash receptacles associated with your residence. hinting at the existence of secret garbage zones she had somehow overlooked. The company refused to investigate unless she provided visual confirmation of non-possession, meaning they wanted photographic proof of a thing that did not exist. In the end, the debt was dropped only after a city inspector confirmed there was no dumpster on site, which should have been evident to anyone familiar with geometry. America's debt circus never disappoints, but at least it's entertaining from a safe distance. Drop your pick for the dumbest disaster in the comments, and brace yourself, because the next round gets even weirder.